Welcome to Off-Court Truths, where we uncover the hidden moments, buried emotions, and untold chaos behind basketball's most unforgettable controversies. Ron Artest grew up in the Queensbridge houses of New York, one of the roughest neighborhoods in America. His childhood was a patchwork of street violence, unstable environments, and emotional turbulence that shaped his identity long before he stepped foot on an NBA court. The survival instincts he built in those early years, quick reactions, distrust of strangers, and an aggressive edge, followed him everywhere he went. Basketball became his escape, but it didn't erase the scars left by a world where fights weren't just common, they were necessary. When he entered the NBA, Artest was electric, a defensive prodigy, a fearless competitor, and a relentless presence on the court. He earned all defensive honors, became an all-star, and helped build the Indiana Pacers into a championship contender. But beneath the success, his emotions simmered close to the surface. Teammates saw his intensity, but few understood the internal war he fought every single day. He experienced anxiety that he didn't know how to articulate, anger he couldn't fully control, and stress that felt like a constant pressure on his chest. Yet despite the emotional chaos, he was beloved by fans for his authenticity, humor, and unapologetic personality. He had the talent to be one of the best defenders of his generation and the instinct of someone who wanted to protect everyone around him. But that same instinct, sharpened by a childhood in survival mode, could turn dangerous when the wrong trigger appeared. For years, Artest tried to balance who he was with who the world wanted him to be. It worked until November 19, 2004, when everything collapsed in a matter of seconds. The question is, what happened that night to make the world see Ron Artest not as a player, but as a villain? The night began like any other heated matchup between the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons, two teams with a fierce rivalry and a history of physical play. The Palace of Auburn Hills was packed with passionate fans, the atmosphere electric and charged with tension. Late in the game, with the Pacers leading comfortably, a hard foul by Artest on Ben Wallace ignited a confrontation. Wallace shoved Artest violently. The two teams exploded into a crowd of pushing and shouting, and the referees struggled to regain control. Artest did something unusual next. Instead of retaliating, he walked away from the chaos and lay down on the scorer's table, headphones on, trying to calm himself. He later said he was practicing techniques he learned from his therapist, breathing, distancing, anything to keep the anger from boiling over. For a moment, it worked. The arena began to settle. The players were separated. The tension slowly eased. And then the cup flew. A fan in the stands hurled a full drink that crashed directly onto Artest's chest. In an instant, his calming efforts evaporated. His instincts, shaped by trauma, sharpened by survival, took over. Artest leaped into the stands, charging toward the man he believed had thrown the cup. Players, security, and coaches scrambled desperately to stop the escalation, but the situation had already spiraled out of control. Fans swung at players. Players swung back. The Palace erupted into a full-scale riot never before seen in NBA history. Within seconds, a heated game had transformed into a national scandal. Artest became the face of the chaos, the center of every news broadcast, the player whose actions would define the night. The NBA was shocked, the media was furious, and the world demanded answers. In the hours after the brawl, the NBA scrambled to understand what had happened. Players were escorted out of the arena under heavy security as angry fans continued shouting and throwing objects. By morning, every news network in America replayed the footage on a loop. Artest storming into the stands became an image that would burn into the public's memory forever. The NBA's investigation moved quickly. David Stern, the commissioner at the time, called the event shocking, repulsive, and utterly unacceptable. The league issued the harshest set of suspensions in NBA history. Ron Artest received the longest of all, suspended for the rest of the season. 86 games without pay. It cost him millions of dollars and the Pacers their championship hopes. The media reaction was swift and brutal. Artest was labeled out of control, dangerous, a menace to the league. Talk shows dissected his personality, often unfairly reducing him to a caricature of aggression. Few asked what emotional triggers led to the explosion. Few acknowledged that he had been trying to calm himself moments before the cup struck him. Instead, the narrative focused on chaos, violence, and blame. Fans were no kinder. Detroit supporters insisted the players were entirely at fault. Pacers fans felt betrayed by a player they saw as key to their title aspirations. On the streets and online, Artest became a topic of rage, fear, and mockery. Meanwhile, inside the Pacers organization, the damage was immense. Jermaine O'Neal and Stephen Jackson were suspended for defending Artest. Reggie Miller, nearing the end of his legendary career, saw his final chance at a championship crumble overnight. Coaches and staff expressed disappointment, frustration, and heartbreak. Artest apologized to his teammates, but the emotional weight remained. Behind the scenes, Artest struggled with guilt and confusion. He knew he had reacted poorly, but he also knew something deeper had driven him, something he didn't fully understand. Over time, he began speaking openly about the anxiety and stress he had carried for years. At the time, mental health wasn't discussed in professional sports the way it is today. Players were expected to be tough, stoic, unbreakable. Artest realized how isolated he had been long before the brawl occurred. As the season went on without him, the Pacers' championship window closed. Their chemistry broke. Their momentum evaporated. And Artest watched every game knowing he was the reason the team's future had collapsed. The public didn't know it at the time, but Malice at the Palace wasn't just the result of one chaotic moment. It was the eruption of years of emotional pain, internal conflict, and untreated mental health struggles. Artest later admitted he suffered from anxiety long before he had the language to describe it. He often felt overwhelmed by pressure, carrying the weight of expectations he didn't know how to cope with. He also struggled with depression, moments of deep emotional exhaustion, and difficulty managing adrenaline during intense games. These issues were magnified in the NBA, where fame and stress compounded his internal battles. He didn't know how to talk about these feelings. In his world, vulnerability was a liability. So instead, he buried the anxiety under competitiveness, buried the trauma under toughness, buried the fear under the intensity that fans mistook for confidence. The night at the Palace wasn't a sudden break. It was the result of years of unresolved internal war. When he lay on the scorer's table, he wasn't ignoring the fight. He was trying desperately to control himself. But when the drink hit him, the shock triggered every defensive instinct he had fought to suppress. His reaction wasn't calculated. It wasn't malicious. It was survival mode, an automatic response built from years of living in an environment where the line between danger and safety was razor thin. Understanding Artest's psychology doesn't excuse the chaos, but it explains the human being behind the headlines. He wasn't a villain. He was a man overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't yet understand. The moment that defined Ron Artest's career didn't happen during the brawl. It happened after, in the quiet of the locker room. Surrounded by angry teammates, confused coaches, and security guards protecting them from the furious crowd outside, Artest asked a question that stunned everyone. He looked at his teammates and quietly asked, "You think we're going to get in trouble?" It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't denial. It was the voice of a man dissociating from what had just happened, struggling to process the reality of the chaos he had been part of. The room fell silent. Jermaine O'Neal stared at him in disbelief. Stephen Jackson shook his head. The magnitude of the moment crashed down on them all at once. It was the instant Artest realized that his actions had consequences far beyond himself. His suspension would derail the Pacers' season, cost him millions, and shatter the trust of a team that had believed in him. It was the emotional breaking point, the moment he understood that the person he wanted to be and the person he had become were suddenly worlds apart. For the first time, he saw the wreckage not through anger or instinct, but through clarity, and it was devastating. The fallout was unprecedented. Artest's suspension, the longest in NBA history for an on-court incident, cost him nearly $5 million in salary. The Pacers' season collapsed without him. Media coverage painted him as the face of violence in professional sports. He lost endorsements, public trust, and the opportunity to compete for a championship. The NBA introduced new security rules, changed protocols for fan interaction, and increased the presence of personnel at games. In many ways, Artest became the catalyst for a new era of player protection and fan accountability. Personally, Artest struggled with guilt, regret, and public shame. For years, he felt like the villain of the world told him he was. His relationship with teammates became strained. His reputation suffered. And even when he returned to the court, he carried the weight of the palace everywhere he went. The turning point came when Artest sought help. He began therapy, openly discussing his struggles with anxiety and depression. He learned to understand his emotions instead of fighting them. This journey led him to the Los Angeles Lakers, where Kobe Bryant became both mentor and inspiration. In 2010, Artest won an NBA championship with the Lakers. During the post-game interview, tears streamed down his face as he thanked his therapist on national television. It was a moment no one expected. The man once defined by chaos now openly crediting mental health support for his success. Later, he changed his name to Meta World Peace, a symbolic gesture of growth, healing, and transformation. It wasn't a joke. It was a declaration of who he wanted to become. Ron Artest's story is a reminder that behind every headline, there is a human being fighting battles we cannot see. His journey shows that trauma doesn't disappear when success arrives, and healing doesn't happen in silence. The Malice at the Palace wasn't just a scandal. It was a turning point that forced the NBA and fans to confront the importance of mental health. Artest's transformation teaches us that redemption isn't about forgetting the past, but learning from it. He proved that even the most broken moments can become the foundation for change. Thank you for exploring the mind behind one of the most controversial nights in basketball history. If you want us to uncover the hidden truths behind another NBA legend, let us know who you want to see next. Your comment could shape our next deep dive here on Off Court Truths.